Decades of mining and mineral processing operations in and around Butte and Anaconda release substantial quantities of hazardous substances into the upper Clark Fork River Basin between Butte and Milltown. These hazardous substances extensively degraded the area's natural resources and created significant risks to human health and the environment. The upper Clark Fork River Basin waterways have carried cadmium, copper, zinc, lead, and arsenic that were released during the historic mining, milling, and smelting processes linked to the Anaconda Company operations in Butte and Anaconda. In 1908, the largest flood on record for the state of Montana spread the contamination down Silverbow Creek, Warm Spring Creek, and the Clark Fork River, and deposited millions of cubic yards of tailings behind the newly constructed Milltown Dam. Now, over 100 years later, some of these areas have been cleaned up. The Silverbow Creek cleanup is nearing completion. 26 miles of Silverbow Creek and approximately 1,480 acres along the creek are nearly finished with remediation and restoration efforts. Approximately 5.6 million cubic yards of tailings and impacted soils have been removed from the floodplain. At Milltown, the dam has been removed. 17,000 feet of new river channel and over 500 acres of new floodplain was constructed. Between the remediation and restoration, a combined 2.6 million cubic yards of contaminated sediments was removed. Cleanup on the Clark Fork River, a 47 river mile portion remaining between Silverbow Creek and Milltown, has begun. Although many who work to remediate and restore these lands and waterways have seen much of these cleanups as very successful, from the fish now swimming up through the Milltown Dam area and native cutthroat trout now swimming in Silverbow Creek that was fishless just 15 years ago, a big question has to be asked. The Clark Fork River is primarily a river owned by private citizens. How do those landowners feel about the cleanups, or the pending cleanups, scheduled on their lands on the Clark Fork River?
We're in the Bum Bridge area. Folks here in Deer Lodge call it the Bum Bridge area. DEQ in the cleanup called it the Trestle area because of the railroad trestle bridges that go through here. It was cleaned up in 2011 and 2012. It was the beginning of the Clark Fork River cleanup, and the big reason for that was the public health risk. It's right in the middle of town. We used to come down here and play as kids. It was a fun place to come down and play. Also, just to get across town, this is the way we would walk. So we're here on phase one of the Clark Fork River cleanup. It was called phase one because it's basically the headwaters of the Clark Fork River here. It's the most upstream phase of the Clark Fork River cleanup. This is also a state-owned piece of property. It used to be owned by Atlantic Richfield, and then it's changed hands, so it's owned by the state. A huge amount of contamination was removed. Actually, when Governor Steve Bullock came and visited the site, he said that if you piled the contamination that was removed just from phase one onto a football field, it would be a stack 50 feet high. So that kind of puts it in perspective, a 100-yard football field and 50 feet high of contamination. So they removed the contamination, brought in clean soil, and did a lot of plantings. They planted 130,000 plantings here at phase one, which is about 1.5 miles of river miles here. One of the most aggressive types of bank treatments we have here, those are called coir logs. It's like a coconut material, which breaks down fairly quickly. It's just there to hold the bank in place and allow the vegetation to establish. You can see that there's willow plantings along there with it, and those willow plantings will grow out and root in, and then the coir fabric will break down and won't be necessary any longer to hold that bank together. You know, the primary focus here is removing the contamination and then replanting and restoring the river. But a secondary goal is providing trout habitat. Hopefully in the future will be a blue ribbon trout stream again, similar to, say, the Bitterroot River or something like that. And if you look at fish numbers in a western Montana stream of this size compared to what we have here, fish numbers are probably about 20 to 25% of what they should be. And a lot of that is the copper contamination from the slickens that we have here.
I'm Maggie Schmidt, and I'm the ranch manager here at the Dry Cottonwood Creek Ranch, which is part owned by the Clark Fork Coalition, which is a nonprofit out of Missoula, river-based coalition whose mission is to protect and restore the Clark Fork River Basin. The Dry Cottonwood Creek Ranch is located 10 miles south of Deer Lodge, so we're right here at Galen. We're in phase 1 of that cleanup area, so the ranch is located right at the most toxic part of this Superfund cleanup.
I'm what's left of Wayne Hadley. I'm by trade a biologist with a specialty in fisheries, and I grew up in Oklahoma to the extent that I've done so, and I was for 23 years the biologist in this region for the Upper Clark Fork.
Well, I'm Hans Lampert. I was born and raised in Deer Lodge, and I was raised on the ranch. My parents come from Germany, inherited the ranch, and they were actually city folk, and they learned everything about ranching from the neighbors.
You know, like 95, they started talking about it, and they didn't remove that dam till, what, 2008? So it was a long time in the process. The engineering was phenomenal, and of course they got in there and got all the stuff out of the old dam site and all that stuff, and actually removing the dam was really quick.
I'm Huey Long, and I bought this land in 1978. I'm a retired soil scientist. I started with the Soil Conservation Service conducting soil surveys in 1972, so it gives me a different perspective about the cleanup than probably most people have. And I was very aware of the pollutants on this property when I bought it, but with the view and the river, it was still decided it was probably pretty good investment. So
I guess I didn't realize that all the willows were going to be down to nothing. And so it was, like you say, all my life, I've seen the willows, you see the river going through, and then all of a sudden, within a few days, you see dirt and river. There's not a willow, there's not grass, there's nothing, it's just like a bomb went off, there's nothing there.
looking at the soils, the sampling and stuff will probably take days, because I'll be quite interested in what those results are and what that means as far as what's going to be removed.
There's totally mixed feelings, and I think that's the way it's always been since it was designated as a Superfund site. There's been mixed feelings about the future of this river.
People were apprehensive because they knew it was going to happen, and by the state government and the federal government, and you really didn't have a say in it.
DEQ will come and talk to us. They come right to our house and talk to us, and I like that. And it seems like the people they have working for them, I mean, they have good personalities, and it seems like they really know what they're doing.
Right now, a lot of waterfowl use, a lot of fur bearer use. It's used heavily by white-tailed deer. There are actually elk down there late in the summer, early in the fall, in most years. There are a lot of wildlife values, which are very attractive to a recreational property buyer who lives in Chicago or Atlanta. He doesn't come out here to want to look at a bunch of saplings. He wants to come out here and see fish and wildlife and eagles. And I fear a significant hit. Hope I'm wrong.
Kind of disturbing to see the amount of disturbance, but I want those badly contaminated materials removed, because what they did years ago, EPA tried to do with ARCO's help, was to just treat those tailings in place with 50 tons of lime per acre, and that made it look a little better, a lot better actually. But I know that if and when the river moved over and meandered over into those treated areas, that the the tailings would be in the river and be causing problems, and that was just a Band-Aid approach. It was cheaper, but not as good as this remedy. And this basically started, I think, the Silver Boat Creek is how they worked out this removal and replacement thing.
I think all of us who were associated with this, and remember, I've been doing this for 30 years now, are concerned and relieved to see the extent of removals that are currently planned. At one time, the anticipation was that they would be able to leave many of those metals deposits in the sediments in the floodplain. And we had some long, hard conversations about, are you going to suspend the laws of physics? The river will move whether you want it to or not. And my favorite quote was, well, we'll engineer it. And you roll your eyes and say, come on, guys, get real. Where do you think the valley came from? It's not a glacial valley, it's an alluvial valley. Look at the mountains on both sides. The river moved. The river cut this valley, and the river's going to continue to play by the rules of physics.
They can do all they want to and be as good as they are, but then when Mother Nature rears her head, she just goes where she wants to.
I'd say a good majority of the landowners have accepted that this is something that's happening. It's, going to affect those of them that own the river, and they're hopeful that it's going to go smoothly. So I would say, and even since I've been here in 4 years, that people's have sort of shifted their mindset a little bit, and seeing what's been going on our place and kind of asking how it's been going, I think they're starting to feel a little bit more comfortable. I know a lot of people are really happy that there's a guinea pig.
We're still going to talk a little bit about that with DEQ to get some off-water drinking sites, and I guess they might even fence to the river with some, what do they call them, hard banks or hard something, so the cows can walk in and not hurt the riverbank.
Okay.
Yeah, or they might, I was seeing a Clark Fork Coalition, they did some off-water sites. I want to see if they might want to do that on our place too, to keep the cows completely off the river for at least the 5 years.
Well, I think the people I've spoken with thus far from the agencies are sensitive to the need to recognize that people have vested interest in this, and that try to make their activities as compatible with the needs of the landowners as possible. And I think that's laudatory. I don't know that you recognize it or not. Relative short time. There was a time when EPA was saying, we're not going to pay anybody for anything. Mm-hmm. And I said, are you crazy? I mean, you're going to go in and do big time economic impacts to these, and these are businesses for most people. And you're going to have to recognize that there are economic hardships and compensate them, or they're going to give you an awfully hard time. And they seem to have come around in that regard, and I'm pleased to see it.
We've had to go through some difficult conversations with DEQ, trying to educate them on, when you drive through a landowner's field without permission and they're not expecting it, it's like driving through their living room. This is, ground that they've poured their heart and soul into for generations, and, it's insulting. And DEQ kind of had a moment like, oh, so we're hoping we're making little things like that go a lot smoother for everybody else down the road. And in doing so, we're creating really good relationships with our neighbors, who the Clark Fork Coalition hopes to have not only good relations, but maybe partner in win-win water projects down the road.
But I expect when it's all done, probably 5 to 10 years after they've done the cleanup on my property, it'll look similar to what it was at 1900 before these tailings were deposited here, and that would be great.
Certainly no one with any sense is going to argue against removal. The question is how that removal is done and what the consequences are in terms of rehabilitation of the riparian habitat.
Basically, from where the roads are, there's fences on the outsides of those roads, so they are taking out, quite a bit of our ground, for those roads, and we will be getting this fall we'll be getting compensated for that loss of hay. It's not only a loss of hay, but a loss of pasture. So there were kind of two ways we went about calculating that loss. And we were able to set the price, and they were really easy to work with from that standpoint as well.
I'm glad to see them here, and I want to see this cleaned up, and I want any of the contaminated soils removed and replaced with better material or cleaner material. And I've seen what they've done up there in phase 1, and although it's kind of a shock at first to go from what's fairly well vegetated to like a huge construction site, I can also already see that the stuff they planted is growing very well, and so it'll take some time, but it'll be much better.
It's been amazing from day to day to watch this ranch transform. Heartbreaking some days, to see it change, but seeing phase 1 and what the potential future is I'm hopeful.
Like I tell most people, I mean, even when we remodel a house, it looks bad before it looks good. So I don't think they're doing any harm.
What we want to do is restore the integrity of that ecosystem. At least that's my goal to the extent I have a voice in it. I should add that my experience with the people involved is that they are nice folks who want to do a good job. I don't have any personal disagreements with them. When it comes to how long it's going to take to rehabilitate that stuff, then we begin to have some differences. I asked this question 20 years ago, Darrell, of some rehab people who had much experience and were well respected in the arena. And they said 25 years to look good, 50 years to really be good. Very depressing. On the other hand, the faster we can move that forward, the better off we'll be, and we have a debt to our children and grandchildren to do the best job possible.
Not only is this ranch going to be kind of getting a new start, a clean start, there's areas that have been fenced out since the contamination was here, or, since the flood happened in 1908, this operation has kind of just fenced those areas off and went on with day-to-day activities. So if you look at it from that standpoint, we're getting a clean slate, and the opportunity for wildlife and grazing is going to be huge moving forward. So that's a huge plus for the ranch. So from a holistic standpoint, it's huge.
I mean, this is my chance, one chance to get this done. And once this process is over, 20 years from now, the money will be gone, and I don't know anybody here that's got the money to pay for this kind of cleanup. So I think they're missing the boat myself, but that's just my opinion.